aware that there's a serious and developing crisis in our pensions industry, a catastrophic situation where 600,000 Irish citizens with defined benefit pension schemes are facing virtual pauperisation in their retirement years, despite a lifetime of making pension contributions, where already 6 out of 10 defined benefit schemes have shut down under your watch. And now we have the ignominy of the Melbourne Mercer Global Pension Index awarding Ireland bottom of the grading list in terms of ranking worst for sustainability of our pension system. Now, forgive me for wondering, Tanaiste, if you are aware of the crisis, you have a very funny way of showing it, because not only has your government done nothing to address this issue, what you've actually done has made the situation worse. Last week, Independent News and Media unilaterally closed its defined benefit scheme on the back of a £23 million shortfall, despite the fact that this was the company that got £140 million of a bailout from the taxpayer. No discussion, no alternative, gone. The latest solvent employer to shut down a pension scheme because they don't want to foot the bill, and there's nothing coming out of this House to put a stop to this type of behaviour. Earlier in the year, we had the appalling example of the CRC unilaterally shutting down its scheme on foot of a €2 million deficit, a tiny amount when lined up against the assets. And to add insult to injury, €2 million is coincidentally the same amount that is now going to be paid from these workers' pension pot to Mercers and all of the other advisers who were involved in that scheme, because your government put wind-up costs higher than members' benefits. So the same professional experts who play all sides of the House, advising the trustees, acting as actuaries, are now going to get money from a wind-up, money from bringing in people into a new DC scheme, and money from administering those schemes. You couldn't make it up. The IASS scheme also has the same advisers, set up a very peculiar and unique funding arrangement. Now, I don't know if you know, Minister, but a new bombshell trustee report has emerged on the IASS scheme, that after years of all the so-called professional advice and a year in operation, this scheme is now in trouble, with the actuary hidden in his report saying that he's no longer confident that the scheme will meet the funding standard. Now, normally, and he says it in the report, that should be brought to the attention of the Pension Authority and they should be required to intervene and take action. No action is being taken in this case. So my questions to you, Minister, really are: when is the government going to wake up and realise that we have a crisis? What action are you going to take to examine the cabal at the top of the pension industry, where the same organisations, the IPT, Mercers and Irish Life, appear on all sides of the fence in this arrangement, while pensioners' living standards are being utterly decimated as your government sits on its hands?
Well, I mean, clearly in relation to the final point that you've made, Deputy, we do have a financial services regulator in relation to the claims and the points that you have just made. You've outlined a number of individual schemes where there are problems, and I will revert to you in relation to those individual schemes. But on the broader point, clearly the approach of government in Lansdowne and in relation to the unwinding of FEMPI, clearly the question of the pension situation will also be addressed. Minister Varadkar and Minister O'Donoghue are both examining these issues. Minister Varadkar has made that clear, that we do know there is of course we're concerned about the deficits that have emerged, and very careful planning is going to be needed to deal with this issue as we go forward. I would make the point, of course, that given the improvements in the economy, which are continuing, as we see from the latest employment figures, we are obviously in a better position to deal with some of the issues you've highlighted than if we were still facing a situation where we had the kind of problems we had some years ago. But the pension issue is a very central one, of huge concern to individuals and organisations. We're certainly conscious of that, and in the unwinding of FEMPI, that will be part of, clearly, the negotiations. We are approaching the whole issue in relation, for example, to public sector pay by a process of negotiation and discussions, and that is how we will have to address the pension issues also.
Deputy.
Minister, if you didn't understand the question or realise the points in relation to the fact that they were being specifically made with regard to particular problems with defined benefit pension schemes, and my very firm claim that blatant mismanagement of these schemes is underway on a vast scale, not just in the companies I mentioned, but in many, many more, at the expense of citizens and pensioners. And while it may be the case on paper that we have regulation, we have a pensions authority and so on, the point I'm trying to make is that that regulation is wholly inadequate. It's not that there's a crisis in funding. I gave an example to your colleague Minister Varadkar a number of weeks ago in relation to a supplementary scheme in relation to Aer Lingus, where there is currently €200 million sitting in a cash for 2 years in a pension scheme where a decision was made to close it and it has not been wound up. People have retired, people could be the beneficiaries of that money, they are being denied access to it. Meanwhile, the trustees, the advisors, the administrators and the management fees are all feeding off that pot, which is getting smaller and getting smaller. And the same names appear across all of the trustees, across all of the industry. I believe that there needs to be an inquiry into this, and I'll put it back to you, Minister. When are we going to beef up the regulation? Because when I put that to Minister Varadkar, he put me in touch with a very nice man from the pension department, lovely fella, who came back to me eventually and said, yeah, it's a very bad form, it is bad, but they're not doing anything illegal. So the law needs to be changed.
Thank you, Deputy Tanaiste.
The points you make are extremely serious, and I absolutely acknowledge the impact on individuals in relation to their income post-retirement, and very serious consequences the issues you've outlined have, if not dealt with. Clearly, you've been raising these with the line ministers with responsibility, with Minister Varadkar and, as I say, Minister Donoghue. If further legislation is needed, I have no doubt that that will be examined. I will ask both ministers for a response in relation to, as I said, to the particular schemes that you have raised here this morning, the particular points you make in relation to them. On the broader issue of whether there is stronger legislation needed, I'm sure if it is needed, it will be considered. I will also revert to you in relation to whether any legislation is planned. It seems clear from your reply that Minister Varadkar did arrange for you to have further discussions and input from his department in relation to this issue, and I will advise him that you would like further contact.